Geek to me radio, da 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 da. Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da.
Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to a brand new edition of Geek to Me Radio. Tonight, we are joined by New York Times bestselling author Jeffery Deaver, talking about the latest book in his Coulter Shaw series, Hunting Time. We'll also talk to him about that time he wrote a James Bond novel, his story about missing out on dinner with Angelina Jolie, all that and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And Merry Christmas for all those of you who are joining us. Our Christmas show, pre-recorded, because it's Christmas, obviously, and I'm not at the radio station. But rather than leave you with the best of, I thought we'd do a brand new show. I've had this interview on tap for a couple of weeks now, ever since he came through St. Louis on his book tour. Was able to chat with him for a while. Really great guy, very talented author, and we got into a lot of different subjects. But first, I want to make sure we tell you about the reason our show is on the air, the people without whom the show would not be possible, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau, the website, of course, as you know, discoverstcharles.com. That's discoverstcharles.com. They just wrapped their 47th year of Christmas Traditions. Christmas Traditions is their big Christmas festival that goes on in starts Black Friday, goes all the way through Christmas Eve. And they do all sorts of things like a Dickensian stroll. You can literally walk through a Christmas carol, interact with the Fezziwigs, Tiny Tim, Bob Cratchit, Young Scrooge, all that kind of stuff on Wednesday nights. Friday nights, they have Krampusnacht in the depot. You can get your picture taken with Krampus, the Calicanthroi, the Mary Lloyd, Gorilla, and all those fun folk. And then, of course, their normal fare on Saturday and Sunday where you can interact with traditional Santas from around the globe, hear groups of people singing period Christmas carols in perfect costumes and everything like that. It's a great time. If you missed it this year, don't be that person next year. Make plans to come out wherever you are. If you're local or from out of town, plan your trip on the website, discoverstcharles.com. Throughout the year, there's always events like this going on. It's a lot of fun. If you've not visited St. Charles, there are so many reasons to do just that. Once again, the website, discoverstcharles.com. We're very proud to have them as our premier sponsor. They've been with us since the beginning. As we always say, it's an historically good time. With that said, we've got my guest to speak with, Jeffery Deaver. Here we go. Right now, we're talking to a New York Times best-selling author, multiple award-winning author. He's actually in St. Louis. I was able to catch up with him while he's here in town today. Jeffery Deaver, thanks for your time today.
Oh, James, I'm delighted to talk to you.
So it's so fascinating. You've got these books out, and one of the things I was going through doing research, this is one of the books in your Coulter Shaw series, Hunting Time. It's out in stores now, and you've almost got where you can almost do like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You could do the Deaver-verse, because you've got Lincoln Rhyme, which introduced Catherine Dance. Now you've got Coulter Shaw. You could link all these. Is there any plan, like in the back of your mind, to do a connected Jeffery Deaver universe where they all meet up and solve some massive crime or bust some huge smuggling ring?
Oh, indeed. And one of the things, and we may get into, philosophy of writing and my technique and approach to that, but one of the things that I keep in the back of my mind all the time I write is that this is about emotionally engaging the audience. I want to thrill my readers. I want to grab them by the heart and the gut, frankly, at the very beginning of the book, and race them through to the end. And I have lots of twists and turns. That's kind of my trademark. But one of the things that delights readers is when they're reading along in a story or a novel, and they turn the page, and then, oh my gosh, it's a character that we met in one of Deaver's short stories from who knows what, 20 or 30 short stories ago. And they get that little, wow, that's very exciting. So yes, indeed, they're going to they're going to get together. I have in mind a book actually where Coulter comes to New York, because if you know my character, Lincoln Rhyme from the Bone Collector series, you know, he's disabled. He doesn't get out very much. But I just love to see Coulter come to the big city, and he's an outdoors kind of guy, and he rock climbs and rappels. So I'm going to have him jump out of a tall building and save the day.
That would be awesome. And I know it's such a cool thing. I mean, going all the way back to when Tom Selleck teamed up with Jessica from, Murder, She Wrote. We love seeing these characters cross over. So that's very exciting that you've kind of already been kind of laying the table for it.
Oh, yeah, indeed. And funny you mentioned that. People have used the term Deaver-verse before.
And you've got, like you mentioned, right from the beginning, you've got this book grabs you, as most years you've got on the book jacket itself. Lee Child and Harlan Coben go into just that. They're saying that it's like you're gripped from page one. There's twists and turns throughout the book. As a writer, what is, without, giving away secrets or anything like that, what is your process? Do you usually kind of start with the ending and work your way backwards? Do you kind of let the story drive you along as you go? How do you kind of, what's your process for writing books like this?
Sure. Well, there's a Deaver template. And I say it's a formula for writing one of my books. And, there's some folks who probably less genre writers, but literary writers, or people who think they're literary writers and say, oh, how dare you write according to a formula? And my response to them is, do you get in an airplane that has not been built according to a blueprint? Or if you're going to have brain surgery, do you want the surgeon to go in without having a clue what she's up to and say, I'm going to play around and see what happens here? No. I have a formula, and the Deaver template for a novel is this. It takes place and this goes back, I've written about 45 novels, 90 short stories. This is true of all of them. I set a very short time frame, about 2 days, maybe 3 days tops. There are a lot of internal reversals, and we writers, when we think of a reversal, what that means is that, let's say you come to the end of chapter 14, and we learn that the hero's sidekick, who we think is a good guy, turns out to be a bad guy. That's an example of a reversal. Or the hero picks up a gun and is going to kill the bad guy, and then the gun, it turns out, it doesn't work. So it's kind of some big surprise. There's a lot of kind of interesting information. For instance, in my book, The Broken Window, a Lincoln Rhyme novel, that's all about data mining. And this goes back about 12, 13 years. I was kind of there before all of this, information about the dangers of our lives being put online. Now, in Hunting Time, the new Coulter Shaw book, there's a lot of, fascinating information about something called a pocket reactor, or a miniature nuclear reactor. And miniature, I mean, it's 60 tons. You and I couldn't put it in the back of our SUV, but it still is quite an interesting phenomenon. I get very interested in that. And Coulter Shaw is actually trying to rescue the engineer who designed the reactor. She's gone missing. Well, anyway, but there's something fascinating about each book where the readers can learn something, and then there's a big surprise ending, and after that there's a big surprise ending, and yes, after that there's a big surprise ending, because I have multiple surprise endings, because I've learned over the years of doing this, readers are really smart, and they can kind of figure out what you're up to. And I'm resolved to trick them. They're going to figure out one twist, maybe two twists, but I hope I'll get them on the third twist. So anyway, that's the template. The books move very quickly. If you ever saw the TV show 24, that's kind of what I do. And there's a lot of great, slow-paced, character-driven crime novels. That's just not what I do. I keep in mind what Mickey Spillane, the great Pulp Fiction writer from the 1950s and 60s, and your listeners may think Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino. No, this was the original concept of Pulp Fiction, detective fiction from the 50s and 60s. And Mickey Spillane said, people don't read books to get to the middle. We read books to get to the end. And it's my job to make sure that readers turn the pages as fast as they can. I aim for a one-sitting read. Sometimes, folks have to, maybe enjoy the book over 2 days or 3 days, but I really want it to move like a race car.
And with the Lincoln Rhyme series you mentioned, you've got 15 books spanning all the way back to 1997. Catherine Dance, we've had 4 books. She's appeared in other ones too. Coulter Shaw, it seems like you put out 1 per year since 2019. Do you feel like you get in a groove with a certain character and you just want to keep writing for that character? Or do you kind of have to force yourself to consciously take a break and go, okay, I'm going to do another Lincoln Rhyme novel? Now, how does your process for working on multiple characters go?
I'm a business person. I'm a manufacturer of a product, as you may have guessed from my reference earlier to airplanes and blueprints and so forth. And I'm very aware of the market. And when I introduce a new character, I have to probably, like Procter and Gamble does, I don't really know, but they have a big launch. Let's say they come up with a new toothpaste, and they don't introduce it in 1 month and then not recreate it, not keep the product on the market regularly. So I wanted to have I guess what I would call the genesis story of Coulter Shaw, and this goes back about, as you pointed out, 3 or 4 years, and then got him up and running. And it's the books are doing quite well. The first book is The Never Game is going to be a CBS TV show.
Oh, wow.
Primetime crime show next year, where it's been shot. I don't know when it's going to air. Starring Justin Hartley, the great actor.
Oh, yeah,
from
sure.
Great guy. Directed by Ken Olin, who's been in TV for a long time. And so that was my goal. So that's up and running now. And at the moment, as we're speaking, I'm looking at my computer, and that's the new Lincoln Rhyme book that I will deliver in, I guess that'll be January. And so next year we'll have a Lincoln Rhyme book because, Coulter Shaw is up and running now. He's got the TV show. The Hunting Time is out. It's doing quite well. So I feel, we'll have Lincoln Rhyme next year, Coulter Shaw after that. And I've just been talking to Hollywood about a TV series featuring Catherine Dance.
Wow.
We'll see what's going on. But the important thing is I teach writing courses, and I tell my students, you're a manufacturer. You got to get that product out there. And the important thing is to make sure that you have books in the hands of your readers, because there are a lot of other opportunities out there. You go to Netflix or Amazon Prime or
Sure.
Hulu, and bang, all of a sudden, 4 new shows you never heard of, and all really good shows, most of them. And so, I want to make sure that we writers make sure that readers have something they can pick up and enjoy, rather than, sit down with that remote control.
It's interesting because you mentioned, you're referencing these products and blueprints, everything like that. It almost sounds like you've got a degree in business instead of a doctorate in law. You graduated from Fordham University, and obviously you're a Mizzou alum. So M-I-Z?
That's me. I'm in St. Louis right at the moment, of course. And I thought, is there any way I could take a little time off and get back to Columbia? And that's not going to happen. I don't have time. It's Denver tomorrow, and then on to some other book things. But it's very nostalgic to be back here. But it's interesting you mentioned my prior careers, because I have the BJ, the Bachelor of Journalism degree from Mizzou. I have the law degree from Fordham, and those were extremely helpful in my writing fiction. Now, at Missouri, I learned how to interview. I learned how, the reporters interviewing subjects, and I learned how to write. Now, I thought I knew how to write. I was writing fiction when I was 12 years old. I wrote a lot of poetry, but at journalism school, we learned meat and potatoes writing, and we learned that writing is about communication. It's not about presenting a very flowery work of art in which the reader may say, "Wow, that's beautiful. I have no idea what it means." and we know we've all read authors where we have to reread that paragraph again and again to figure out what's going on, even though the writing is quite good. The words fit together quite well. It's rather poetic. But Mizzou taught me that, and also taught me how to touch type, which is very helpful because, writing 10 hours a day, I don't have to hunt and peck. I can get a lot of work done. But the law, which is quite interesting, people say, well, Jeff, you write crime books and you were a lawyer. You must have been a criminal lawyer. And I say, well, I'll tell you what, I represented banks on Wall Street. So you draw your own conclusions.
We just dipped our toe in the political.
We did. We said we were going to.
That's all right.
Avoid that.
I can't fault you for what you said, so that's all right.
Yeah, I think corrupt business is something that transcends.
I agree.
Politics. It's about as bipartisan as it comes.
I would agree. Just so many different avenues we can take this from here. I know you talked about Lincoln Rhyme. So we're going to see Justin Hartley as Coulter Shaw. We've already seen the great Denzel Washington as Lincoln Rhyme. When you are you allowed to come in on the casting? Do you have any input from the studio or from the television series that's doing these projects at all? When you come in and say, hey, look, it's my baby. This is kind of who I envisioned. Or is it just like, nope, I'm going to leave that to the professionals and the casting people?
We'll pause there, take a quick commercial break, come back and get his thoughts on casting for the different TV shows and movies he's done that are based on his work. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
Hey everybody, it's Dan Gilvezan, voice of G1 Bumblebee and Spider-Man on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, saying welcome back to Geek to Me Radio.
Welcome back to Geek to Me Radio. I'm your host, James Enstall. Want to make sure we tell you about our movie sponsor, of course, Marcus Theaters. MarcusTheaters.com is the website. Value Tuesday is going on, of course. You can see movies for just $5 on Tuesday. They've got specials going, like $1 hot dogs at most locations. They have their free complimentary size popcorn, too, if you are a Magical Movie Rewards holder. And why wouldn't you join that club? You get points for seeing movies and buying your concessions, which that you can then use to get more concessions and more movies. That's a great deal. The new Whitney Houston biopic, I Want to Dance with Somebody, now playing in theaters. Avatar 2, now in theaters. Lots of movies that are coming out and upcoming that you'll want to see. And if you want to see these movies, do it in the best possible surroundings with the greatest sound, the greatest visuals, and of course the best concessions. Marcus Theaters. Make sure you enter 2023 prepared with their unlimited popcorn tub. You buy it up front and then $4.50 to refill it throughout the rest of 2023. It pays for itself. Make sure you join the Magical Movie Rewards program. Make sure you get that big bucket of popcorn. Make sure you get out and see some movies this holiday season and in the new year. You won't regret it, especially if you're doing it at a Marcus Theaters or Movie Tavern location. Once again, the website, MarcusTheaters.com, for the best movie-going experience in the galaxy. Before we took that last break, we were chatting with Jeffery Deaver, and I asked him about, with these projects he's done, getting adapted to movies and TV shows, if he ever has any input on the casting.
Well, it's the latter. I'm actually working on an original TV series myself, creating it, and then writing the pilot. Whether anything comes of that, I have no idea, but it's something that I guess we could say that is my baby. It's not based on anything I've written, any novel or short story. It's an original TV series I've done for streaming, some streaming platform. We don't know quite where yet. That's different, though. When it comes to the books and stories, I give that to them. They're the experts. They get the, I've been very pleased. I've had, I think, 4 movies made, 1 TV series, and maybe 3 movies and 1 TV series. And, the filmmakers, the scriptwriter and the director, take the idea, they take the essence, they'll take the twists and turns and the characters I've created, and then translate that onto the screen. Now, I have to say, when I've written this original pilot and the series, it's very easy. I come up with the original idea and bang, out it comes. Had I been forced to take one of my own stories and translate it, I'd have no idea how to do it. My scripts would end up being 300 pages long, and that's like 4 hours a movie. Of course, now I talk about superhero movies. They're all about 3 hours
Sure, yeah.
long. And frankly, I feel that's like 2 hours too long, but that's just me. I get kind of tired of explosions and, the kind of special effects that substitute for storytelling.
Sure, yeah. And you mentioned the writing, obviously, The Bone Collector, screenplay by Jeremy Iacone. Did you sit down with him, or did he just, or again, was it one of those things you trusted him, like, nope, here's what I've got, do your thing?
Yeah, James, you're talking to a man who turned down a chance to have dinner with Angelina Jolie.
Oh, my goodness.
And no, why did that come about? Because I was writing my next book when the premiere party was going on. This goes back some years. And I was invited to come to the premiere. It was in New York. I was invited to, go to the cast and crew party, and have a dinner. Sort of a smaller dinner with the principals. But I was working on my next book, and I didn't want to take the time. And so that kind of answers how involved I am in the movies. All the people who I've dealt with have been very, very polite. But they have their own ideas. They maybe have asked my thoughts for some input, and I'm happy to give it to them. But at the end of the day, it's their project. What my approach is this: I will not sell a property of mine to anybody whose story I don't know. They have to be a working producer, a working director. I can go look at what they've done, and if I like it, you take a chance. You just kind of take a deep breath and say maybe it'll work out and maybe it won't. The other problem about my being involved with that, and this is something I'm going to have to face if anything comes of this series I'm working on. I generally don't play well with others.
Oh, okay.
So when I write a book or a short story, it's 98% mine at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. My editors are very talented. They give me good input, but ultimately it's my project, and I have the final say on it. With a movie, that's not the case. I suppose if I could produce and direct, that would be a bit different, but you still have to work with, the director of photography, the various the sound editors, the editors, the film editors themselves, casting, location work. That's just, it's much more efficient just to sit down and write something.
Well, you're much more dedicated than I am, because if I had the chance to go hang out with Denzel and Angelina Jolie, I'd be calling my editor being like, yeah, the book's going to be about 2 weeks late. I'm sorry. I couldn't do it. So good for you.
Yeah.
And I know you're also only the second American to be allowed to write, or I don't know if allowed is the right word, a 007 novel. In 2011, you wrote Carte Blanche, which I'm a huge James Bond fan. We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of James Bond this year. We've had directors John Glenn and Martin Campbell on the show earlier this year. When you're writing a Bond novel, do you have a meeting with Barbara Broccoli and talk it over? Kind of what was the process there?
Well, no, not the Broccoli's, because actually none of the continuation novels have been turned into films. And I guess for your listeners, we should explain that Ian Fleming died at a very young age in the mid-1960s, quite sadly. And I think you probably know better than I at this point. I haven't, focused on that project for some time, but I think there were only like 13 007 books written, some short stories too, but fairly limited library. Yeah. And of course, he was such a popular character. The Ian Fleming family said, well, we'll find some authors to kind of, carry on the standard. I think Kingsley Amis was the first, and there have been various authors throughout the years. And yes, Raymond Benson was the first American to be asked to write it. And I was the second. It was such an honor. I read all the Bond books when I was growing up, and I was a kid when I read them. And you think, oh my gosh, 8 and 9 years old reading a Bond book, and at the time they were really tame. There was the 1950s. All the romance was off camera, so to speak, or off the page. The violence was very understated. And, Bond was he actually wanted to get married. He was a womanizer, but he just couldn't find the right woman to settle down with. And when he did, in one book, I won't give anything away, or won't give too much away, it didn't end well, let's put it that way. And you know which story I'm talking about, of course, James. And so I just jumped at the chance to write the story, and I did say to the estate, and I just was quite frank about it. I'd love to do it. I'm so honored, but I can only write a Deaver book, and by that I mean it would be a James Bond novel featuring James Bond and the whole cast of characters, M and the officer from Q and so forth. But it's going to have twists and turns in it. It's going to have big surprise endings, and that is not something that Ian Fleming did. He was a very linear writer, and we learned in the beginning of the story. We have our hero. We learned about the bad guy, like Goldfinger, for instance, or Blofeld, and Bond and the villain are on a collision course, and we don't know how it's going to come out, and we don't know whom we might lose along the way, maybe some compatriots of Bond. But there are twists and turns. In Casino Royale, there was a bit of a twist, but that wasn't what Fleming did, and that's not why people read those books. But I need that twist and surprise. And they said, oh, yeah, go right ahead and do that. And the other thing I did was I wanted to set the book in the modern day, because and all the other authors, I believe, have done period pieces. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because I want Bond to be immediate. Of course, the movies take place in the present day, and I thought my book should as well, because I could imagine, a young reader, and I wanted to get young readers, teenagers primarily, as well as adults, interested in Bond as a literary figure. And they're reading along, and Bond, he pulls off the side of the road and fishes in his pocket for coins to call headquarters. What is that about? What's a payphone? The kids aren't going to know that. So I set it in the modern day. And but as we started this conversation, I would love it to be a film. It's quite cinematic, but there's just been a tradition of the Broccolis. The Broccolis, by the way, own the film rights. They're independent of the Ian Fleming family. They've just never they've hired scriptwriters to do the original scripts, and I don't know whether it's an economic thing. They'd have to pay rights for the book and then pay a scriptwriter too. I have no idea why they don't, because some of the books would make great movies, but that's their choice. And I had great fun doing it, and we talked about doing another one. The book did quite well, but I don't own the copyright to it. The only thing I've ever written that I don't own the copyright to. And I'm a bit, and that was part of the deal. I understood it. When we split the revenue, it was all fair. It was a good deal. But I think, I make something, I kind of want to own it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we're seeing that with comic book creators too. They're kind of wanting their own thing. We're just seeing these creators like Peter David who are in the hospital. They've done all these great things with like the Hulk and Spider-Man. They don't own the character. So that's the huge thing.
Exactly.
For creator-owned properties now are becoming the big thing. So I totally see where you're coming from with that.
Oh, absolutely.
And if just out of curiosity, since we're talking a little bit about Bond right now, the Daniel Craig is done. We've got it's up in the air whether or not they'll go. They're talking about all sorts of different things are being bounced around. It's the way of the internet. Whether or not it'll be set back in the 60s, Cold War era Bond, whether or not it'll be new, whether or not he'll be a younger Bond in his late 20s or a more seasoned. Have you any thoughts on the direction of the next Bond film should take now that Daniel Craig kind of very succinctly ended his run? It's anybody's game. There's a bunch of different ways to restart it. Any thoughts?
And we'll get the answer from Jeffery Deaver to that question right after this. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
This is John Glenn, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
Meeting you with a view to a kill.
As we enter this final segment, I want to make sure we tell you about the best place to get comics if you're in the St. Louis, St. Charles area. That's Bugs Comics and Games, right off of Bryan Road in O'Fallon. Easily accessible from either Highway 70 or from the Page Extension 364. If you are wanting to make your New Year's resolution to get more into comic books, maybe you're a younger person, you're seeing these movies and these TV shows like Sandman and like Black Panther and all these movies and projects that are coming out, and you're like, what are these? I've seen that. I know the movies and the actors. I don't know the comic book stuff. Get into it. And if you want to make that your New Year's resolution, the best place to do that is at Bugs Comics and Games. All sorts of back issues, which for me, in order to be a good comic book store, you have to have a decent array of back issues. And Larry and Tim at Bugs Comics have that in spades. New comics every week. And of course, you can get supplies, toys, merchandise, video games. They've got Pokemon cards and everything like that in there as well. It's a great place to just go spend some time browsing and hang out. If you want to fill some holes in your collection, if you want to start a collection, if you want to sell your collection, Larry and Tim are the people who can help you out no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are in your comic book journey. Check out the website, bugscomicsandgames.com. If you're listening from out of town, they'll ship right to your door, of course, for easy convenience. And of course, join the Avengers Club so you can start saving money while you enjoy your hobby. You'll get discounts on your weekly pull list and more. Once again, the website, bugscomicsandgames.com. Check them out on Facebook. Give their Facebook page a like. Bugs Comics and Games on Facebook. Very proud to have them as the official comic book sponsor here on Geek to Me Radio. Before we took that last break, obviously we're talking about the Bond novel that Jeffery Deaver wrote, Carte Blanche. And I asked him, since we're at the end of Daniel Craig's run, if he has any thoughts on who should be the next 007.
Sure. What I would do is something that is guaranteed to make basically no money whatsoever, so no one is going to listen to me. I would take a very understated actor. I don't know if you know Guy Pearce, for instance.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, great subtle. He was in Memento and some other great films. And there's nothing flamboyant about him. He's built like Bond, who's a fairly slim fellow. He wasn't a bodybuilder by any means. And I would set it in the present day, but I would make it a very dark, gritty, a dark, gritty story that would be missing almost all special effects. In the books, Q was not a person. Q was the division within the Secret Service that provided equipment. And there were a few gadgets that Bond had. He had a briefcase that had a silencer hidden in it and a knife. And he had a revolving license plate contraption on his Bentley. He did not drive an Aston Martin, by the way. He drove a Bentley.
That's correct.
And he drove an Aston Martin because the Bentley was in the shop. He drove an Aston Martin in one of the books. But he got by on his resources. He was very clever. And one of the things I did in Carte Blanche that I was very happy to do, and I got some positive feedback for it. If you know the Bond movies, and I have to say, I'm not a big fan of the more recent Bond movies because they are special effects oriented.
Sure.
And they're kind of goofy and silly and hip and smarmy. And I like From Russia with Love is my favorite.
Okay.
Nothing contrived about that whatsoever. But we opened the James Bond book, and M gives him a movie. I'm sorry. We opened the James Bond movie, and M gives him an assignment, and then he goes to see Q, or Q Division, whatever. He goes to the special effects or the equipment, and the Q happens to give him the 5 things that coincidentally he's going to use and need later in the movie. You look at that and say, oh, well, okay, we know he's going to use this. We know it's going to save him. Well, what I did was, which is probably what happens, and actually I know some CIA officers, and this is kind of how it works. In Carte Blanche, I would put Bond in a situation where he had to break into a building, or he knew he was going to have to fight somebody. Well, he on Signal, or whatever I had some kind of a secret encrypted app. He texted the Q department and said, "I need this," and they'd have somebody local ship it to him. And people said, that's how it really works. And so I tried to take the story out of the comic book realm and make it a bit more real. And that's what I would do with the with a movie nowadays. And, we've got no end of villains. We don't have to come up with a super conspiracy to take over the world,
right?
Which, we never believe anyway. Evil is worse when it's up close and personal. And but that's why nobody's knocking on my door saying, Jeff, would you help us out with the new James Bond? Oh, you want a downsized Bond? I don't think so.
And you said, obviously, you want to be able to own your own properties, the characters you create, like Lincoln Rhyme, like Coulter Shaw, brand new book, Hunting Time, out in stores now. If you're listening right now, you can get it. We always recommend going to your local bookstore, obviously, but failing that, you can hit online and obviously pick up. This is the latest in the Coulter Shaw series. But if you were able to, like someone said, hey, your choice, any existing franchise, they'll give you a nice deal like they did with the from the Bond people. Is there an existing franchise, be it a TV, movie, or comic book franchise that you're like, you know what, I'd like to take a crack at that, whatever it is?
Yeah, I have to say no, for several reasons. One is that I am not very conversant in other books, even in this genre, with continuing characters. I read a great deal, but what I read is research. I do a book a year. I do 5 or 6 short stories a year. And each one of those requires a lot of detail. Readers love detail. They love to learn things when they read a crime novel. And so that takes up a lot of my time. And I can't really think of anybody that I'd be I'd be conversant enough about to write. And again, the other thing is, if you're in this business, you have a bit of an ego, and I would not really be. Bond was different because Bond was, an iconic figure that from my youth.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to. It's like getting in a race halfway through, who knows what, Le Mans or Formula One. You're the substitute driver. Somebody's taking you this far. Now you have to, even if you go across the finish line, that's not me. I'd want to be in the race from the very beginning.
That makes sense. And last question before I let you go. I know I want to get out of here. I don't want you to keep too much longer. You get an appointment at the St. Louis Library tonight where you'll be meeting a bunch of people talking about Hunting Time. I've always asked writers this, and I get a different answer from every writer. How do you deal with writer's block when it comes up?
Well, writer's block doesn't exist.
Okay.
And I'm going to quote a great author, Terry Pratchett, who said, you can fill in whatever state you want. His quote was, writer's block does not exist. That's a term that was invented by people in California who cannot write. And of course, he was being facetious about it. And I need to explain what I just said. Writer's block, people get the idea that you have a brilliant novel that's underway, and then you end up at a spot and cannot proceed past that point because your brain is failing you for some reason. Well, what you have is not writer's block. You have idea block. And that simply means that you don't know where the story is going to go. So what I tell my students when I teach a course in writing commercial fiction, crime oriented, but it applies to any kind of any popular genre, is that you plan it out ahead of time. You outline. Hunting Time took me 8 months to outline. The outline was 120 to 140 pages long. I didn't write a single word of the prose itself during that time. Wow. I started with Post-it notes, stuck them up on my wall in my office at home, and I kept staring at them, and I'd move them around. I'd add more Post-it notes. I'd take some down, and by the end of the day, I should say by the end of the 8 months, I had I moved from Post-it notes to my computer at some point. I had that every single scene, the 80 chapters, all planned out. It was agonizing at points, and I have to say I was blocked coming up with an idea for, let's say, toward the end of the middle. We authors call that the dreaded middle because, the story kind of flags then. But that idea, what am I going to do? That doesn't work. Okay, now I know. I take that out, throw it away, and then put a new scene in, and then that worked. So you've got to do the work at some point. But when you do it, by sitting down with a blank computer screen and just charging forward, you're going to end up in the middle of the book and think, where do I go from here? You'll get the same idea that I did in the outline, ideally, but that means you're going to have to go back and rewrite 40, 50, 60 40, 50, 60 pages in earlier chapters to get your new idea to work. You proceed ahead, you do another, who knows what, another 100 pages, you get to the same point. Oh no, I've got to go back and revise what I just did. If you do it in outline form, you'll realize that, oh, you know what? Okay, now I've got the entire thing done. I've cut out the bad parts. I've put in the good parts, and I can sit down and write. And I can write the book in 2 months or so. And just if I may, just let me say one other thing about the outlining process. That is doing the blueprint for the airplane, the blueprint for the book. Has there ever been a book that you read and you thought this should never have been written? Yes, of course you have. Everybody has. And sometimes that happens because people, they struggle through this book. They finally get to the end and they have 400, 500 pages of well-written prose, but there just isn't a story there. There was no point in writing this book. It's agonizing to do. And I've been in that situation. But think about this. If you outline that book ahead of time and you got to the end, or you got to the middle and realized there simply was no ending, it would be very contrived, then you throw out the Post-it notes. You've wasted, 3 weeks, a month of your time, and you start on something else. We owe everything to our readers. Okay, well, I promised I wouldn't talk about politics, but I will say this. I get paid to make up things for a living. Yes, just like they do inside the Beltway in Washington, D.C., or Jefferson City here. Of course, I'm being a bit silly now, but I am so lucky and privileged to do this. And I think every time I sit down at my computer, and frankly, every time I'm awake, is my new book or my new short story going to make readers excited? Is it going to make them happy? Are they going to scratch their head because they can't figure out something? Are they going to say, oh, this plot was so stupid, I figured it out right away, and they were disappointed? So that's kind of our job, and I make sure that I give them books that work, and I get rid of the idea of books that don't. So now, and I should tell you and your listeners, my books are much tighter and more concise than when I'm speaking. So don't think that the books are filled with digression. So, and if I may say just one other thing, not only do I write novels, but I write short fiction, and I've been working with Amazon for the last few years, writing for their Amazon Original Stories program, which is very exciting. I love short fiction. That gives me the chance to really have I guess I call it a distilled surprise at the end of the story. And so if any of your listeners are interested in that, of course, they're Kindle only, so they don't compete with the independent bookstores. I too support independent bookstores. They're not in print. But if you do have a Kindle and you'd be interested, they're not expensive at all. And I guarantee you're going to have a lot of fun with those.
Absolutely. And this has been great. I wouldn't worry about being concise. I think everything you've said has been brilliant. I've hung on your every word. And this has been an absolute delight for me to be able to talk to you. Again, the novel Hunting Time, out in stores now. There's something special about a bookstore at Christmas, too. I got to say, when I went out to get your book, it's like, I just want to hang out here. I don't want to leave the bookstore. It's all decorated, and it's just a great time to hit the bookstore. So hopefully you'll all be giving the gift of literature to someone you love this Christmas. And no better gift than Hunting Time in the Coulter Shaw series by the great Jeffery Deaver. Where can people keep up with you online if people want? You've got a great website. Are you active on social media as well?
I am indeed. You can go to jeffreydeaver.com. And of course, Facebook and Twitter. I haven't checked the news lately if Twitter's still around. I suppose it's still operating. I think maybe some changes there, but so far, all my updated news will be on those two. So enjoy Instagram too. You'll see some fun pictures.
Perfect. And again, if you're listening to this right now after the fact in the podcast form, scroll down to the bottom of the page. We'll have a link to jeffreydeaver.com there as well. I think Twitter's still around. I've usually got the app open, and my phone hasn't blown up Mission Impossible style yet, so I think it's still alive. We'll see how it goes. Congratulations on the new book, Break Legs at your event tonight. Jeffery Deaver, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
James, a real pleasure. You take care now.
That does it. Another show in the books. My thanks again to Jeffery Deaver for making this show sound, for being on the show. Thanks to Joey V, my executive producer, for making the show sound as good as it does. I would not still be doing the show here 6 years after I started without his help. Max on Movies is up next. Make sure you stick around for that. And, of course, thank you to my sponsors, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau, DiscoverStCharles.com, Marcus Theaters, MarcusTheaters.com, and Bugs Comics and Games. Larry and Tim over there, BugsComicsandGames.com. That's going to do it for us. Until next week, my friends.
It's not in the way you watch iZombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young Art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, Santa's Workshop. Good night.
Hey kids, are your parents about to buy you a shiny new toy from Amazon?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Well, don't be selfish. Share some of that money with us. Before going on Amazon, make sure to type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser. It will look just like Amazon.com, except it'll say referral Geek to Me Radio up top. And then when you check out, a tiny percentage will go to support the show without costing you 1 cent more. So before your parents get you that gizmo, gadget, or widget, make sure they type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser.
Bit.ly/geek to me. Bit.ly/geek to me.